It's really easy. That's what John Berryman was saying.
Cool. Okay, I'm Tim Creasy, software developer at a company called Cicada in Franklin. Recently started working here about 4 months ago, and they're a Clojure shop. So I've been flying by the seat of my pants for past few months, picking up in Clojure, but also functional programming. So it's kind of a double whammy, trying to understand FP thought processes and designs, while also picking up on Clojure. So, but I'm definitely interested personally in sort of, I guess, the theory behind FP, maybe pitfalls of it. I'm younger. I wasn't necessarily burned in any way by object-oriented programming. So, where that falls short. So things like that are what appeals to me.
Yes.
I'm curious, Tim, so how are you learning Clojure? I mean, was this something that, were you exposed to Clojure previously, or what languages were you programming in previously, and how have you approached?
No, so I had schooling with C, and then JavaScript is my other, main language, but I guess they had no discrimination. They asked me to do their interview questions in Clojure, so did those, got hired on. There was an onboarding process for a few weeks where, essentially I just came in and went through a few books, Clojure programming, Clojure for the brave and true, and sort of bounce questions on them. And other than that, it's just been, learning when I have time at night and learning while I go.
I'm curious, so and I've heard that Clojure is a functional programming language. What have been your first learnings? Like, what is, or why would, I guess a better question, now that I'm just going to mumble for a minute and then finally be smart. Why would you, when you're getting into this, are you seeing how it's functional, and why would you say that, why does people say Clojure is functional?
I have a hot take.
I think part of the problem is, I don't know if I've necessarily seen like a unified definition of functional programming. When I think of functional programming, I think of higher order functions, immutable data structures, what have you. So I'm drawing a blank on what your original question was now, as I started to ramble.
Have you touched Clojure?
Yeah, so Clojure is the main functional language that I've played with. I mean, I haven't, so I went through like learning it, and I did Clojure for the brave and true also, and the other Clojure book, I can't remember what it's called now, but it was yeah, and just like not having gone from Clojure to like Python, which has functional capabilities but isn't necessarily a functional language. Yeah. Clojure, the big differentiator for me, like main one first, is immutable data by default.
Yeah.
So the literal data structures, when you're creating something in the syntax, like you do a map or a list or a sequence, like it is immutable. So like it's a different foundation on that level for you to build your programs in a functional way. And that you can't actually update data unless you really try. Like you can't modify in place a piece of data unless you really try. So it enforces that, and that has some interesting consequences that I've only messed with a little bit. But also there's a lot of things in Clojure that are almost like technically FP. And what I mean is they have inheritance, they have like a version of inheritance, they have a version of overloading a method, but they're all subtly different. Like their version of inheritance, or like their version of interfaces, is they define a protocol, and any object can implement that protocol, but it's not like an inheritance. You're more just implementing an interface. And the version of overloading a method, they switch on the type or like information about the argument pass. So it's kind of like a framework for switching on arguments for a function with the same name for like dispatching. So they do like dispatching based on the arguments versus overloading based on the class structure. And it's all like, it has like some, like the consequences for me are hard to tease out. And it's been a while since I've looked at it, but it's like, there's like these aspects and decisions that have been made on the foundation of having immutable data that I think are, and like functions as first class citizens, which is kind of standard for most languages now. That seems different. I don't know exactly how that makes it.
So would you say that the core of it would be the immutable data part? I mean, and then that forces you to think about your data and variables differently?
I think that's a big selling point for Clojure. I mean, it's like one of the few, like you can do functional programming in any language. In JavaScript, they have like immutable JS. Every Python has its library of persistent data structures.
Yeah.
But there isn't I don't know if there's very many languages, and I think most of them would be called functional, that force you to use persistent data structures. Or like you have to opt out of persistent data structures. Like there's still an opportunity in a use case when you it's less efficient sometimes to use persistent data structures. I don't know. For me, that's kind of hard. That's a hard one to tease out because it has its own pitfalls.
Right.
Folks, people complain about object-oriented programming. Like you pass something in, and you don't know what happened to it. But even sometimes you expect it to modify. If you're not used to the functional paradigm, sometimes when you call a method on an object, like Django query set, you expect it maybe to modify something, and it actually returns a new query set with the modified attributes and leaves the thing that you called the method on the same. And so you might have some bugs there where you don't realize that you haven't captured the result of the function. But at least it's consistent. I mean, that's one element of it. And I was curious, from your perspective, Tim, you've used functional you're using this language or this platform off the bat. Without having necessarily professionally gone into something else. What frustrates you about Clojure or functional programming? What are the pitfalls when that's the default?
That is a good question. It's been easy in the sense that our database of record is also immutable. We're using Datomic. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's an immutable database. It's actually also by Cognitect, the people that are backing Clojure. But it's nice in that our whole stack is immutable by default. But as for what has been challenging for me jumping in, is more of a personal problem. It's thinking in an idiomatic way, using Clojure's standard library. I mean, there's just so much, and my default for whatever problem I'm going to tackle is I'll think of how I would achieve it in C or JavaScript or whatever it is, and then try and map that to Clojure where it's really just a completely different way of, or functional programming in general is just a completely different way of thinking about a problem and thinking of a problem as data instead of in a data transformation instead of actually mapping out the steps to transform that data, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that argument for me, it always, I feel like the counter argument is that's just good programming practice. You make well-defined interfaces, or you prefer modules that do something without you having to worry about how it does it, to modules where you have to take an active role in participating in the process of making it work. And so that's one point of where functional programming, I feel doesn't have necessarily a monopoly on some of the ideas that get associated with it. It just sometimes you have a good idea, and like it's not really functional. I mean, maybe so there's something about preferring functions as a way of expressing a program or an idea enables that easier, or
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
I want
No,
to.
it's definitely it's interesting, and it's I know what I've been looking for as of late is like actual mathematical backing of why should one prefer functions, and I don't know if there's any papers out there or blog posts or whatever, but it's been helpful now that I've kind of switched that mindset, but I want to know, I don't know if I'm necessarily clear on the why or the argument for why.
Yeah.
Why should one prefer functions?
So have you, I know Wilkes Joyner was he was the engineer that brought Clojure to Cicada. Have you tried to reach out to him and buy him a beer?
I actually have thought about that only recently. I keep hearing his name mentioned more and more, but I would love to sit down with the guy and hear his thoughts on sort of the history and the decisions behind moving into Clojure.
Yeah.
So what books or tools have you been using to learn? I mean, obviously it's lesson learned.
Yeah.
Let me have me best for Google Hangouts.
What have I been looking at?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like it's your job, so sometimes you just plow through and
Yeah.
load the thing and Google.
Yeah.
But that's also because you're given a specific task or a feature or a bug or something to work on. Whereas, like, if I were to, I'm thinking in terms of myself and just being selfish at the moment of, like, if I were to go and try and understand this thing of Clojure or functional programming and get my head around it, what would you recommend, or what have you seen that helps you get started?
Well, I don't know if the Lispy syntax will freak you out at all. The first few chapters of SICP are helpful, maybe getting one accustomed to that. But other than that, the book that's been most helpful to me is Programming Clojure.
What's it called?
Programming Clojure.
Programming in Clojure?
Yeah,
I think
there's also a Clojure programming, but Programming Clojure is more helpful.
I know people jump to this a lot, but a lot of Rich Hickenstocks, the creator of Clojure, are he's a charismatic speaker, and his thing is functional programming, so it's a good combination of like.
He created Datomic as well.
Yeah.
Bill Israel was mentioning him as one of the dudes that he follows.
Yeah, I mean, even outside of functional programming, I think there's some pretty alluring ideas. I'll leave it up to you whether you think they're valid or not. I think that I like them, but I mean, I think part of my impression that functional programming is like a little bit dogmatic and less structured is because he is has been a part of my experience learning functional programming, and he's such a charismatic speaker. And like, like I don't know what charismatic is the right word, but it's like on an intellectual, because he has like intellectual charisma.
That's a good draw, man.
Yeah, God, I know it's weird.
So you're in a cult now.
No, you definitely either jump on the bandwagon or you don't.
That's what I'm trying to do.
I'm calling the Eventbrite leaders. I'm telling them that you're in a cult. They'll probably be like, no, functional programming's an okay cult.
Right, yeah.
They're
As long as he's a better
that's
programmer.
not a bad thing.
Yeah. That's cool.
Somebody's gonna watch this later and be like, what is this thing? Yeah, John Berryman's like, no, you guys can't be in Penny University
Get you
anymore.
kicked out.
Yeah.
So, well, I don't know if, well, I thought Jason Orndorff's suggestion about, so he answered some questions and was like, basically suggested that we find libraries or tools that have components that follow some kind of functional principle. And he gave the example of Git, which has an immutable log at its core, and try to piece out kind of the
Oh,
trade-offs.
Git. Sorry, I was thinking GitHub.
Yeah, and maybe like actually look at the code and see what utility it provides, what functionality it enables, and also what it makes difficult. Like he gave the example of git commit amend as something that would be maybe not straightforward with an immutable log or like an immutable backing. And also garbage collecting. I mean, that would be kind of an interesting attack too, because Git ultimately like compacts things in a different format and stuff. So there like are maybe compromises around that, and that might be educational as to like the ultimate utility for some of these. And React, I was interested in React too because it, you know, it follows like this declarative interface, and you don't necessarily tell the function how to change it. You just say, hey, here is my function of the view, and here's some hooks that you can use to like make that work. Might be another like specific cases where we can learn more about functional programming by examples. I don't know. I can like it was kind of hard to think of examples, honestly.
But yeah, that's what I was about to say. I've been trying to come up with maybe other systems, and I haven't.
Yeah, I mean Datamic though. I mean that's an explicit. That seems like it's, you know, it's almost like the too obvious because it's built on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I know immutable logs get used in some distributed systems somehow. It's just something that's like floated through Hacker News or something. That might be a breadcrumb. But yeah, it was tough. Yeah, like yeah, somehow there's like an append only record of what's happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is to ask the question, is like Caleb still at Cicada, or did he move on?
No, he's still there. He's the lead over there.
What is he giving you to? I mean, have you talked to him about how to learn this thing?
Yeah, I mean, he's really the one that's sort of, I guess, helped me trudge a path. You know, he helped get me a few books. You know, I'll sit down with him for an hour or two and hash out, you know, a couple questions I have. But really, they've been good of, you know, here's some material, here's kind of how we picked up on everything. We're here if you have any questions, but they've been, or I should say it's been helpful for me to at least at first kind of trudge along on my own and come to them with questions instead of having necessarily like a clearly defined learning path set out. I just find I retain things a little better that way.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't remember if it was you or someone else. Did you share the article on JavaScript? Functional programming interview JavaScript?
It wasn't me. I'd read that there. That was actually a helpful article.
Harrison.
Harrison Pickett.
I thought that article was actually pretty nice, at least because it scoped functional programming in a pretty definite way. Like, yeah, they have pure functions, function composition, avoid share state, declarative over imperative. A couple. I was just kind of reading off the screen. Yeah, and I found that tractable, which was kind of refreshing. Like, functional programming isn't have to be every good thing in programming. It's a paradigm that prefers functions over objects, and that kind of, or maybe only uses functions, or has immutable objects. But and like that just for me that sets up a situation where I feel like I can look at it and explore in a more methodical way than just looking at everything that gets lumped under functional programming and try to like really evaluate whether I should buy into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any questions, I guess, about Clojure or functional programming in general? About, I don't know, after using it for a little bit. I mean, hasn't been too long.
Yeah. Let me think. I know another thing that I, am trying to read about in my free time is just, maybe pitfalls of immutable data structures. I know Clojure's sort of solution to it. I don't know what else is shared persistent data structures, so it's not as expensive of a copy, doing these operations all down the line. But, I think that's something I've been curious about is maybe performance benefits of that. I know there's arguments around Clojure just because it's on the JVM or what have you, but more so just, what is the negative cost of not being able to, mutate these objects or mutate state or what have you.
You got to handle that stuff on the front end, right? Because you're going to have a lot of.
It gets garbage collected if you don't have a reference to it. Yeah. So you end up like that. I was thinking the same thing. Like with JavaScript, what ends up happening is like, let's say you want to keep the history or something.
Yeah.
If you've made 100 changes and you have like an array of 100, you limit your history to 100. After you start popping things off, any like data, any components of the data that are no longer referenced or used, like if you have like you replaced half your array with another like incremented half your array, the old unincremented half gets thrown away because there's no longer a reference to it, like a reference correctly to it. Because like they have a reference. I think they have reference forward. I don't know.
I believe so.
Yeah. So like, unless you have a reference to something that references it, it ends up garbage collected.
Yeah.
Even if so like the node itself doesn't know like its own previous value. You just have an entire unit that's the previous value.
Okay. So I don't know if you guys can shed any light on that or if you've read anything.
I've read it's pretty performant.
Okay.
Relatively. I obviously like. I think it was like amortized, like and I don't remember. I think it was like log 12, something weird. There's a blog post on it where they just like dived into it because I was really curious about that too. Like I was like, is this just snake oil? Like, what happens when, like you said, like don't you have to get rid of the data at some point, and isn't it way slower and all that? But something about the structure makes lookups and additions like still slower, but not that much slower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I may say amortization, lazy evaluation, and persistence. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, it does actually. I can look it up too.
White paper.
Oh. That seems a little. I don't think I've read this one. Is this like this looks pretty more academic.
Yeah, this is. I mean, it's like a white paper.
Yeah. Isn't this? I don't know. That seems like it might be the one where one of the first papers where they define or like explore persistent data structures.
Oh, really?
I don't know. I remember.
By Chris Okazaki.
Yeah, I mean, I'm grasping at straws a little bit.
Yeah. No, I'm
So,
ready.
One question, Tim. What kind of, and I know this is a negative question, but what errors have you or mistakes have you made initially here? I mean, you're coming into a new language. You're gonna, I assume you've hit walls where you're like, I shouldn't have done that, or I had to learn a lesson. What do you have anything in particular in the first 4 months you think of? Either it's too many, and
Yeah, I know. I mean, there's.
or
I think the biggest one is it's just our development environment is, you know, I don't know how much you've read about it, but so, you know, there's this wonderful REPL. You can REPL into everything. So in prod, you can REPL in and you can actually make changes on the fly, you know, to production code. And I think that the biggest thing is, you know, when running like a report or running a query for some ticket we have is mistakes that I've made is REPLing in and running this query and you know, realizing like 400,000, you know, data records or something.
Yeah.
And but just not having a grasp of you know, the scope of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, really just, you know,
I feel like in general, like,
e-comments.
oh, I mean, just no. I mean, to me, that from someone who's never been in a system like that kind of power kind of scares me, because it's nice to be able to go back and say, oh, this is the commit, or this is like the cut of the the system that caused this issue.
Yeah.
Whereas when someone, I guess if you don't have pretty robust logging on it, like it adds a layer of difficulty to debugging, because you also have to consider whether someone made, you know, a one-off change.
Exactly.
That isn't in the production code. That's in the production code and not in your repository.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it's powerful. I mean, that's kind of cool.
It's very powerful, but it's you know, it's being very cognizant of where you are, what you've loaded, what namespace you're in. You know, and it's nice when I switch over to like AWS stuff and I have these nice like constrained IAM permissions. You know what happens? And it's like I go there. It's like, here's the world.
Right.
Sit there for about 5 minutes before I make my decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait to hit enter. Kiddo, can you
The
look
light
at this?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if we don't have enough to fuel a full hour, I mean, I was planning on doing a couple exercises on Code Wars or something. I mean, that's Tim. That's like your job, though. So I mean, that might not be fun for you.
Yeah, I'd love to hang out. I mean,
Yeah.
we've got to stand up here in 15 or 20 minutes, but
Okay.
I'm happy to do whatever. I'm learning along with you guys. I profess no mastership.
Well, let's try this. I'm gonna pull up the GitHub link and we can do a closure challenge together. Maybe like I'm pretty rusty. Chad's interested but new,
Yeah.
and you're. You say you're not a master, but you are master today. So.
We on closure?
Yeah.
Sign up.
I might have lost y'all.
Hey, Tim, are you still there? My Chrome just crashed. Hey, I guess we.
Hey, don't know what happened there.
Yeah, my Chrome just crashed, which is weird. I signed out of GitHub and it didn't like that.
It didn't like it.
Signing out of GitHub.
Hey.
What problem were you looking at?
I'm just picking a. I'm jumping into. Okay, I guess I can screen share this one. It's pretty easy.
Yep.
So this code does not execute properly. Try to figure out why. Namespace multiply bug fix. Define multiply. Okay, well that's so. Closure does prefix operators, not infix, and this is trying to do an infix operator, so it should be fixed if we just do something like that, right? Let's try. Cool.
Sweet.
Sorry. I guess I had to link my GitHub account. So I'm just gonna jump in. Oh. I feel like I'm a junior developer. Let's see.
Hey, I'm Dave. Dave. Nice to meet you.
Chad.
Chad, nice to meet you. Sorry, we're getting the freezing. It's cold.
So I guess I can train. Okay. Here's another. We're just jumping into some closure.
Okay, cool.
Tim is the other guy that's on Hangout. So
I wish screen. We should have gone screen here and set up. Are you familiar with closure?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've done a little bit. Yeah, I've done closure. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I mean, after this, I'm gonna hand it off to you.
Oh man, I don't know.
I mean, I don't know. It's been a while since I've done it too. So, I guess the instruction for this one are: if we list the natural numbers below 10, they're multiplied by 3 or 5. We get 3, 5, 6, and 9. So it's 23. Finish the solution so that it returns the sum of all the multiples of 3 or 5 below the number passed in it. Okay.
All right.
If number is a multiple of both 3 and 5, only count once.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm actually not really sure how to, like, I would understand how to do it in a different language, but I'm not sure how to do it in closure.
You're defining a function called solution that's passed in a number. That's the variable passing in. So
Yep.
then whatever you're to do is going to be your execution there.
Okay.
Is that what?
I just accidentally, I saved it. Yeah, that's definitely right.
Yeah. So you.
So I want to,
Let's see. So.
my inclination would be to filter a list of 1 to that number, and
Mod equals 0.
And yeah, and when mod 3 or mod 5 equals 0, then allow it through the filter and then pass it to the closure sum function. But I'm
Yeah.
not sure what mod is for closure. So I guess we can do a quick filter.
There's a filter, yeah.
Filter. I think that's it. I really don't.
Parentheses.
Parentheses, yeah. That makes sense.
Yep.
Parentheses. So I'm gonna say get what's the right syntax for defining a variable?
I think it's
Well,
paren.
def would be to
Yeah,
def variable.
Yeah, unless you do. Well, no, you can do it.
Implicitly.
Yeah, in there you can just do fn instead of the number sign. So you're doing like a shorthand, so you can do it that way.
And then
Whatever you're passing in.
and then
And so you'll want to do mod instead of the percent sign. Yep.
Equals just double equals, or would it be?
It would just be a single equal.
Man, the lack of paren matching
Yeah.
is killing. Okay, so I have this function, and then I have the or, and I have the anonymous function.
Yep.
And then I need a range of 1 to that number. I don't really know necessarily how to do that.
So there's
You can
a range function,
Range, and then
and
you
you
pass
pass
in.
it, and it will, or
So
number.
that means
Yeah.
go to that number inclusive?
No.
Or
No, yeah, it would not be inclusive.
So then you just want to sum. Or I guess reduce.
Reduce with plus. Yep.
Okay, so this probably won't run. Let's see. Oh, okay, sweet.
Man, look at you.
I only needed to hang my hand held. So,
Could not have done that fast.
well, I should get a chance to try. I don't know. If you guys want to comment, I mean, so this solution, it's kind of hard to read. I don't think that's necessarily indicative of all functional programs, but you have a lot happening in a very brief space. I think the main thing for me is
How do you figure out where to start?
Yeah. Can you
How do
walk through?
Yeah.
get to the
Walk through the
clearly-
first thing that happens, and then it go back out of that hole.
Sure. So I guess the first thing I'm thinking is that I need to check every number from 1 to the number passed in, right? And here, so in the problem set, they say find the solution that returns the sum of all the multiples of 3 or 5 below the number passed in. So I want to first I need to figure out all the numbers between 3 and 5 below the number passed in. And I think the easiest way of that is just checking each number to see if it's a multiple of 3 or 5. And I know just from doing FizzBuzz, 10 times, mod the number and 5 will give me checking to see if that's 0 would be a pretty good indicator.
So that's what this first.
And so I'm going to do one for each, but I want to know if either is true. I want to allow the thing to go through. So that's where that OR function comes in. And you can see the one thing I thought was cool about Clojure, one of the things is that there's kind of a minimal syntax. Every function has the same function arguments.
Yeah. So you have that function. The or is then you get the parameters after the function call.
And then maybe I think can you use a number as a leading?
I don't know. I don't.
So like this might make it easier to read at least.
Yeah.
Just say,
You're just gonna find it up there.
yeah. I mean, it's less brief. It's more so this usually like what he like Emacs or even Adam has this like there's like a pattern branch matching.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
um,
Oh, right.
yeah. Now I can kind of just see like that's kind of clean. Like
Yeah.
I think I'm not sure if I'm doing the return right.
You still got I in is multiple of 3 or 5.
Yeah.
And then will it just return the last function call? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I mean that's one way of doing it too. There's probably a way to even reduce it even more. Like, and like the last step is like, so I had this list of numbers 3 or 5, and Clojure like you prefer to, I guess, express operations on lists using like their built-in functions. So they have all kinds. That's like another cool thing. They have a bunch of list like functions. And so I know also from like just doing problems like this before, like if I want to get a sum of something, like reducing it. Oh, so this kind of maybe takes some explaining. So plus, when passed in like 0, 1 argument will return 0. But when it's passed 2, and like in reduce, you pass the previous result and then like the next increment. I mean, they'll obviously just return plus like the sum of those numbers. So as long as you keep iteratively applying that to each item in the list, you get the full sum of all the 3 or 5. But you might be able to like query or do like, I don't know, partial application or something here. It seems like I don't really know how that would work or if it's valuable. I don't know. But I feel like, I tend to write my Python like this now to sometimes, but also like Python, I've heard like they prefer people to use list comprehensions because list comprehensions, like you can do something really basically the same with like the filtering, and it's a little more, I guess, unexpected.
Is there a filter function on the?
Yeah, there
Or is
is.
it just or are you just using the if else?
I was using a filter. There's a filter in a map, but I've started just using list comprehensions because it's, I guess, more portable.
But when you do it in the list comprehension, are you then just doing an if else?
So you can
Like
do
meaning
you can add like a literal filter to list comprehension. So you do like X for X in list.
yeah.
If you just after that do if condition of X, it'll only return the ones that match that condition. Okay. So it's,
Yeah, that's what I didn't know if it was just a simple if statement or if there was an actual filter statement.
oh yeah. I really do need it. Like I feel like
No, you can keep going. I'm not going to be able to do it as fast as you. I know Clojure enough to know some syntax, but as far as knowing how to solve problems with it well, I don't.
Where are you coming from?
Software school finished up in January, so I think
Oh.
Tim was there before.
Nice.
Tim was before you said.
Yeah, I think he was the cohort before us.
Okay.
Oh yeah, and then I'll show you other solutions, right?
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah.
that's cool. So this will be like the best. Nice.
I've
So
never seen that before.
the threading macro.
I don't know.
So I know I've talked to Tim Potes. I would say, what is your guys' take on the threading macro? If you
Are you saying what's Tim Pote's take on the threading macro or my take?
I know it's Tim Potes' take, but I was curious about you.
I know he is starting to not be a fan of it. It's not necessarily clear at all times. I'm a huge fan of it, because what this is saying is this is the thread last macro, right? So
Yes.
number I don't know if you can see my mouse. Number gets passed into this. Number is passed as the second argument to range. So then you have a range of all numbers from 0 to number.
Yep.
You take the rest of that.
You
So
ignore this.
from 1 So then the result of that gets passed as the second or the last argument to rest. So you get 1 to the number. Then you're doing the filter, exactly what you were doing. And then applying the plus function on that.
Right. Because addition, addition can accept 2 or I think 1 or more elements. So it's like if you have more than 2, it'll just add all of them.
So this is just passing the results of the previous one down to the next one? Is that what's happening? No? Like number?
Yeah. So like what
Yeah.
the threading macro is basically, it just passes the results of each item to the next item. This times its last argument, I think.
Okay.
Yep, that's the thread last macro.
Yeah.
See you next time.
Hey y'all, I gotta jump off. I'm gonna have to
I'm
jump
gonna.
to another hangout here in a second.
That's cool. Well, that was interesting. It was awesome. Thanks for coming and sharing your
Yeah.
experience. Like,
Yeah, if you guys do this again, I'd love to come down in person. I just couldn't make it today.
sweet.
Take it easy.
Go.
I'm the.
I don't know. Are we
I guess.
camera on?
South
Can we not
Broad.
wave?
Oh,
Bye.
Showing.
Yeah.
if you want to say that.